Have you ever wondered how a small-town kid, overlooked by pro scouts and lacking the flashiest stats, could end up becoming a central figure in one of the greatest moments in sports history? Picture a jam-packed ice rink in 1980. Lake Placid, the roar of thousands chanting, "USA, USA," echoing off metal rafters, and a Cold War rivalry simmering in the background. At the very center of it all stands Mike Eruzione, captain of the underdog U.S. men's hockey team, poised on his skates with a singular mission: to slay the Soviet giant that had dominated the sport for years. To truly understand that moment, when Eruzione fired a shot that electrified the entire nation, you have to go back to the roots of a boy who grew up near the Boston Harbor, learned the game on scrappy local rinks, and cultivated a fierce determination that would eventually carry him all the way to Olympic glory. Mike Eruzione's story begins in Winthrop, Massachusetts, a tightly knit community where hockey served almost as a rite of passage for every kid who could lace up skates. Eruzione wasn't a prodigy by any means. He didn't breeze through youth leagues under the spotlight of national scouts. But he had an uncanny drive, an underdog resilience shaped by countless hours on the ice, chasing loose pucks, crashing into boards, and learning that hustle often trumps pure talent. It was this work ethic that got him noticed at Boston University, where he elevated from a modest recruit to a respected figure on the ice, the kind of player whose fierce competitiveness and team-first attitude stood out to coaches and teammates alike. Even then, he was never the biggest, fastest, or most technically gifted. But what he brought to the rink was an unshakable confidence that every shift could swing momentum his team's way. That intangible quality, call it leadership, heart, or pure determination, caught the eye of Herb Brooks, the head coach of the 1980 U.S. Olympic hockey team. Brooks was a visionary, a man determined to fuse American grit with the speed and finesse he had studied in European hockey. He knew he needed more than just skilled players to face the Soviet Union, a team that had conquered nearly every international tournament for decades. He needed someone who could rally a locker room of college-aged athletes, many of whom came from rival schools. He needed a unifier, someone who could be a relentless spark plug on the ice and an anchor of calm off it. Eruzione, with his affable personality and never-say-die approach, fit perfectly. So, when Brooks named him captain, it raised eyebrows. There were bigger college names vying for that honor, yet Brooks saw exactly what the team needed: a person who led not by intimidation or outlandish skill, but by galvanizing those around him. Before the Americans could even dream of an Olympic upset, they had to endure one of the most demanding training regimens in hockey history. Herb Brooks was infamous for his grueling practices, making players skate Herbies until their legs were jelly, pushing them through marathon drills immediately after games when the performance wasn't up to par. Eruzione quickly became the voice encouraging others, coaxing them to dig deeper, reminding them why they were there in the first place. When tensions flared between players from rival colleges, Eruzione was often the glue, cracking a joke or deflecting arguments, channeling the team's energy into a collective will to win. That type of camaraderie, hammered into place over endless training sessions, would become the foundation of their Olympic run. As the games approached, most analysts doubted this ragtag U.S. squad could even dent the Soviet armor. The Soviets were a machine, a squad of seasoned professionals who trained together nearly year-round. Just weeks before the Olympics, they demolished the Americans 10-3 in an exhibition match at Madison Square Garden, reinforcing the notion that a showdown at Lake Placid would be little more than a formality. Yet Eruzione and his teammates refused to accept that fate. In interviews leading up to the Olympics, Eruzione would calmly say, "We're here to compete, not just show up." That confidence wasn't bravado. It was a genuine belief in what they had built together under Coach Brooks. It set a tone, and the American public, battered by inflation and Cold War anxieties, began to latch on to this tiny spark of hope. When the Olympics began, the underdog Americans started surprising teams left and right, eking out come-from-behind victories through a blend of relentless energy, tight-knit teamwork, and the spectacular goaltending of Jim Craig. Still, the looming question was, could they really match the Soviet Union? In the days leading up to the fateful medal round clash, Eruzione remained a steadying presence. He reminded everyone in the locker room that the Soviets were human, albeit supremely talented humans who could be rattled by fast-paced play and intense forechecking. Privately, even some on the U.S. roster probably couldn't shake the image of that 10-3 shellacking in New York. But having a leader who never wavered in his belief helped them push past doubts. Finally, it was time. February 22nd, 1980. One of the most storied dates in hockey history. The crowd at the Olympic Fieldhouse in Lake Placid was buzzing with anticipation, a mixture of hope and nervous energy. You could feel the Cold War tension, the sense that this wasn't just a hockey game, but a symbolic struggle between ideologies. Cameras flashed, flags waved, and the Soviet team took the ice to a chorus of half-hearted applause and muted boos. Then came the Americans, greeted by a thunderous ovation unlike anything most of these college players had ever experienced. Eruzione, leading the team as captain, skated out with the kind of quiet composure you'd expect from a hardened veteran, not a 25-year-old who'd never played a second of professional hockey. The puck dropped, and from the outset, the Soviets showcased their trademark precision. They zipped passes around the ice with uncanny speed, forcing Jim Craig into early acrobatics in net. But the U.S. players didn't fold. They countered with punishing checks, aggressive rushes, and youthful determination. Eruzione, always quick to spark a shift's energy, threw his body around in the corners, hunted down puck carriers, and looked for any possible breakdown in the Soviet defense. By the end of the first period, the game was surprisingly tight. A late American goal stunned the Soviets and tied the score, foreshadowing the emotional roller coaster still to come. Although the Soviets jumped ahead 3-2 in the second period, the Americans refused to retreat. The Soviets' legendary goaltender, Vladislav Tretiak, had been controversially pulled by coach Viktor Tikhonov, an act that some argue still haunts Soviet hockey lore. Eruzione and his teammates felt the shift. The Soviets seemed rattled, and the relentless American forecheck began taking its toll. Early in the third period, the U.S. tied the game 3-3 on a goal by Mark Johnson. Then came the moment that would etch Mike Eruzione's name into sports immortality. Eruzione found himself lingering in the high slot, the puck sliding toward him as if guided by fate. Time seemed to decelerate in that split second. He corralled it and snapped a quick shot that rocketed past the Soviet goalie. The lamp lit up, and the crowd unleashed a deafening roar that nearly tore the roof off the arena. Eruzione lifted his arms in triumph, eyes blazing with the fire of a man who had just proven every naysayer wrong. The scoreboard read 4-3 in favor of the U.S., and the Soviet juggernaut had officially been shaken to its core. Even though over 10 minutes remained in the game, the sheer force of that moment, the captain scoring the go-ahead goal, sent a surge of adrenaline through the American bench and the stands alike. Analysts still debate the tactical nuances of why the Americans, on that particular day, outlasted the Soviets. Some point to Herb Brooks's conditioning regimen, which had honed the Americans into one of the best third-period teams in the tournament. Others emphasize the Soviet coaching decisions, like benching Tretiak, and how they disrupted the team's usual rhythm. But ask the players, and they'll say it was something more ethereal, an unbreakable sense of belief, a unified desire to fight for each other until the final buzzer. At the heart of that unity stood Eruzione, a captain whose unwavering optimism and relentless energy permeated the team's psyche. When Al Michaels delivered his iconic line, "Do you believe in miracles?" Yes. As the final seconds slipped away, the bench erupted. The fans lost themselves in sheer jubilation, and the Soviet players wore stunned expressions as if their world had been tipped upside down. Eruzione, now forever a symbol of the miracle on ice, embraced his teammates with tears of disbelief and joy. But what happened next only elevated his legend. After all, the celebration died down and the world moved on. Eruzione chose not to pursue an NHL career. He retired, content to forever remain the kid from Winthrop, who captained the greatest underdog victory hockey had ever seen. He turned his focus to motivational speaking, fundraising, and youth outreach, sharing his story of perseverance and unity with new generations. From a cultural standpoint, the impact of the miracle on ice was seismic. Americans, in the throes of Cold War tension and national self-doubt, found a renewed sense of pride. The media turned Mike Eruzione and his teammates into instant heroes, covering the story as if it were a modern-day fable. Kids flooded local rinks wanting to be the next Eruzione, the next Jim Craig, or the next Mark Johnson. Hockey in the United States saw a surge in popularity, laying seeds for future successes on the international stage. On the Soviet side, the loss triggered intense soul-searching. Their once invincible squad had to come to terms with being dethroned by what they had dismissively considered amateurs. Many Soviet players and coaches insisted that benching Tretiak was the turning point, a moment they would replay in their minds for years. Yet it's also worth examining the other side. Some have argued that perhaps the miracle has been mythologized to the point of overshadowing the actual brilliance on the ice. The Soviet team, arguably one of the greatest hockey teams ever assembled, deserved credit for revolutionizing the sport with their fluid, possession-heavy style. Others point out that the U.S. still had to beat Finland to claim the gold medal, although that achievement often sits in the shadow of the monumental victory over the Soviets. Controversies aside, none of it diminishes the magnitude of what Mike Eruzione and his team accomplished on that unforgettable day. In the pantheon of American sports moments, where Babe Ruth's called shot, Jesse Owens' Berlin triumph, and the immaculate reception live on, the miracle on ice stands out as a deeply resonant underdog epic. It wasn't just about winning a game. It was about renewing faith in the idea that nothing is impossible if a team truly believes in itself. Mike Eruzione embodied that spirit. He represented the everyday athlete who defies the odds, reminding us that history can be forged in a single moment by those who refuse to bow to intimidation or conventional wisdom. It's a testament to the raw power of sports to uplift an entire nation, to shape identities, and to create legends out of ordinary people who step up at the right time. And so, we circle back to the question, was this the greatest moment in American sports history? Mike Eruzione's name will forever be linked to that conversation. Even if you believe there might be another contender, the image of him raising his arms in victory, the crowd roaring, and the Soviet Empire crumbling before a band of scrappy college kids is hard to beat. Decades later, that spark of hope and determination still resonates. So, what do you think? Is Mike Eruzione's game-winning goal in Lake Placid the ultimate sports miracle? Or does another come to mind? Let us know in the comments, and keep the memory of that extraordinary winter alive. Because if the miracle on ice taught us anything, it's that no dream is too big, no foe is truly invincible, and all it takes is one shot, one leader, and one indomitable team to rewrite the pages of history forever.